Somewhere beneath this dust, a civilization asked a question that has never stopped echoing. Iran is not just a country. It is an idea, a civilizational force that has survived every empire that ever tried to erase it. By 4000 BC, proto-urban settlements dotted the Iranian plateau, among the earliest in human history. The Iranian plateau was blessed with lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, tin from Central Asia, and copper from Anatolia. Susa, in southwest Iran, emerged as a great center, where pottery, culture, and commerce flourished. The Elamites formed Iran's first true kingdom, a sophisticated civilization rivaling Mesopotamia in culture. Elamite script, law, and art shaped the region for 2,000 years, a foundation the Persians would build upon. The Elamites raided Mesopotamia, carried off the great stele of Hammurabi, and clashed with Babylon. But the Elamites would fall to Assyria. By 700 BC, a new force had risen, the Medes, an Indo-Iranian people who united the plateau's tribes under a single empire. In 612 BC, the Medes and Babylonians destroyed Nineveh, shattering the Assyrian Empire utterly. Then came Cyrus the Great, a king unlike any before him, who founded the Achaemenid Empire. In 20 years, Cyrus took the Median Empire, outmaneuvering Croesus of Lydia by marching through winter, a feat not thought possible, then swept the Greek cities of Anatolia and the Near East. Cyrus's genius was not only conquest. He preserved local laws, restored temples, and kept conquered kings as governors. The empire grew because it cost less to join than to resist. In 539 BC, Cyrus entered Babylon without a battle, welcomed, according to his own account, as a liberator. He freed the Jewish captives and allowed them to return to Jerusalem. Cyrus built the first truly multicultural empire, stretching from the Aegean Sea to the edges of Central Asia. His Cyrus cylinder proclaimed freedom of religion and the release of enslaved peoples, radical ideas for the ancient world. Cyrus died in battle on the northern frontier, killed by Queen Tamiris of the Mosaddegh. He was buried at Pasargadae in a modest tomb. Iranians still lay flowers there today. Cyrus's son Cambyses conquered Egypt in 525 BC, making the Achaemenid Empire the largest the world had ever seen, stretching all the way from the Nile to the Indus. Cambyses died and Persia erupted. 19 battles, 9 rebel kings, every corner of the empire in open revolt simultaneously. Darius crushed them all within 2 years. He then built Persepolis, a ceremonial capital of breathtaking beauty and ambition. Darius was above all a systems builder. He divided the empire into 20 satrapies, each governed by a Persian noble, the world's first bureaucracy. The Achaemenids had extensive infrastructure, roads, postal systems, and standardized currencies binding vast distances. Then Persia turned its eye to Greece. In 490 BC, Persian forces landed at Marathon to punish a rebellious province. Against all odds, the Greeks pushed the Persians back, handing them a defeat. But Darius never forgot Marathon. He died with revenge unfinished, leaving that war and that throne to his son, Xerxes. Threading through all of this was Zoroastrianism, a faith that cast Persian kings as agents of Ahura Mazda, the god of light, imposing divine order on a chaotic world. Xerxes believed that extended to Greece. Xerxes' great invasion of 480 BC began. At Thermopylae, 300 Spartans under King Leonidas held the entire Persian army for 3 days. They died to the last man, becoming legend forever. Xerxes then suffered a catastrophic naval defeat at the island of Salamis in Greece. The Greeks had stopped the world's greatest empire. Yet Persia endured. The empire rebuilt, retreated inward, and remained the dominant world power for another century and a half, before one of the greatest conquerors the world has ever seen came to the fore. In the kingdom of Macedonia, a young prince had come to the throne. Tutored by Aristotle, hardened by war, and hungry for glory, the world would come to know him as Alexander the Great. In 330 BC, Alexander burned Persepolis to the ground, a wound that Iranians have never fully forgiven. Persepolis was not just a palace, it was a statement. Its art deliberately incorporated Greek, Egyptian, Babylonian, and Indian motifs, a civilizational synthesis without precedent. Yet Persian culture absorbed Alexander rather than being destroyed. His successors adopted Persian dress, customs, and governance. Zoroastrianism, a theology that would echo through Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, continued to grow. By 247 BC, the Parthians, a nomadic Iranian people from the northeast, began their long climb to imperial power. At Carrhae in 53 BC, Parthian horse archers annihilated 7 Roman legions, shocking the Mediterranean world. Parthia was one nation Rome never conquered. The Parthians developed the Iwan, a great vaulted open hall that would become the defining architectural form of all later Iranian and Islamic architecture. From Iran's Parthian world came Mithraism, a mystery cult worshipping the Persian god Mithra that spread through the Roman legions, reaching as far as Britain before Christianity superseded it. The Parthians held their empire for nearly 5 centuries, a long, loose federation that preserved Iranian identity beneath Greek surface. In the 3rd century AD, the Iranian prophet Mani fused Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and Christianity into a single new faith, Manichaeism. It spread along the Silk Road into the heart of Western Christianity itself. Alexander's successors, the Seleucids, tried to Hellenize Iran, founding Greek cities like Seleucia on the Tigris. But Persian culture proved immovable. In 224 AD, Ardashir I overthrew the Parthians and declared a new Persian empire, the Sassanids, with Zoroastrianism as state religion. The Sassanid Empire was a golden age, philosophy, medicine, architecture, and art flourishing under royal patronage. The Sassanid Empire sat at the center of the Silk Road. Iranian merchants, diplomats, and ideas moved between Rome, India, and China, making Iran the world's indispensable middleman. Khosrow I embodied that golden age entirely, and is remembered as a philosopher king who translated Greek and Indian texts into Persian. The Sassanids fielded the most formidable heavy cavalry in the ancient world, the cataphract, horse and rider both encased in articulated steel, a weapon Rome feared for 4 centuries. In 260 AD, Sassanid king Shapur I defeated and captured Rome's emperor Valerian in battle, the only time in history a Roman emperor was taken prisoner. Shapur commemorated it in stone forever. From the Arabian Peninsula, a new faith was spreading with extraordinary speed. Islam unified the Arab tribes under a single god and a single purpose, and they rode north with ferocity. But the Sassanids never saw them coming. Decades of war with the Eastern Roman Empire, Byzantium, had bled both empires dry, leaving the Sassanids exposed. In 636 AD, Arab Muslim forces met the Iranian Sassanid army at Al-Qadisiyah. The Iranians had war elephants and superior numbers, yet the battle turned against them, changing history forever. The Sassanids, bled dry by a century of war, had nothing left to give. By 651 AD, the Arab armies had shattered the empire entirely, and one of the great civilizations of the ancient world was gone. The last Sassanid king, Yazdegerd III, died as a fugitive, murdered by a miller in his former kingdom. Under the Umayyad caliphs, Arabic became the language of administration. Persian was sidelined, and Iranian converts were treated as second-class Muslims. These indignities lit a fire that would burn for a century. In response, Iran proved the adage, "The pen is mightier than the sword." Iranian intellectuals launched the Shu'ubiyya, a literary and cultural revolution placing Persian civilization equal to Arab culture. The Abbasid Revolution of 750 AD was an Iranian coup. Iranian converts, Iranian administrators, and Iranian armies overthrew the Arab Umayyads and brought the new caliphate to power. The Barmakid family, originally Buddhist priests, became the Abbasid Caliphate's most powerful ministers, Persians running an Arab empire from Baghdad. Yet again, Iran refused to be erased. It converted to Islam and then reshaped it from within, profoundly. The Sassanid dynasty of Bukhara in the 9th and 10th centuries deliberately resurrected Persian as a literary language, commissioning the first great works of New Persian, including the precursor to the Shahnameh. In 934 AD, the Boyhids, a Shia Iranian dynasty, did something extraordinary, capturing Baghdad, reducing the Abbasid caliphs to puppets. Iranians now controlled the Arab Empire from within. Between the 9th and 11th centuries, Persian language and literature experienced a renaissance under dynasties like the Sassanids. Iranian scholars dominated the Islamic Golden Age. Ibn Sina in medicine, al-Biruni in geography, Omar Khayyam in mathematics and poetry. The story of Ferdowsi and Sultan Mahmud is one of history's great betrayals. The Sultan commissioned the Shahnameh, then refused to pay. Ferdowsi died in poverty, his payment arriving as his funeral left the city. Now known as one of the greatest Persian poets, Ferdowsi completed the Shahnameh in 1010 AD, 60,000 verses preserving Iran's pre-Islamic identity. Ferdowsi's greatest tragedy is Rostam and Sohrab, a father who unknowingly kills his son in battle. It is Iran's Hamlet. Ibn Sina wrote his Canon of Medicine in Persian-speaking Hamadan in the early 11th century. It remained the standard medical textbook in European universities for 600 years. Omar Khayyam, mathematician and astronomer, wrote quatrains of subversive beauty, questioning fate, praising wine, and facing mortality with defiant wit. Iran has always had its rebels. The Seljuk Turks swept in from Asia in the 1030s, and within a generation, they spoke Persian, built Persian-style mosques, and patronized Persian literature. Another conquest absorbed by Iran. The Seljuks brought order and Sunni orthodoxy, but not everyone accepted both. From the fortress of Alamut, Hassan-i Sabah led the Assassins, a force that terrified Crusaders and Seljuk sultans alike. From Alamut, the Assassins plagued the Crusader lords of Outremer. In 1192, they killed Conrad of Montferrat, just 2 days after being elected king of Jerusalem. Iran's reach into the Crusader world went beyond daggers. You've likely heard of Saladin, but he was not Iranian, he was Kurdish. He was, however, a product of Iranian civilization, educated in Persian culture, tradition, and shaped by Iranian learning. In 1187, after a siege of 12 days, Jerusalem fell to Saladin's forces. The city that had been held by the Crusaders for 88 years was retaken without the slaughter that had marked its original conquest. The Christian world braced for massacre, but instead, Saladin offered ransom, safe passage, and mercy. A moment popularized by Ridley Scott in the 2005 film Kingdom of Heaven. The Khwarezmian Empire dominated Iran in the early 13th century. When its foolish Shah executed Genghis Khan's envoys, Iran was put in the crosshairs of the most ferocious force the world had ever seen. In 1220, Genghis Khan's Mongols invaded, destroying cities, massacring populations, and reshaping Iran with catastrophic violence. Jalal ad-Din Rumi spent his life fleeing the Mongols westward to Anatolia. He wrote the Masnavi, 100,000 verses of mystical poetry. Today, he is the best-selling poet in the United States. The Mongols killed millions, yet within 2 generations, their descendants ruled as Iranian-style kings, speaking Persian and building mosques. Hulagu Khan's Ilkhanate destroyed Baghdad in 1258, ending the Abbasid Caliphate. Yet the Ilkhans became Persianized rulers, funding extraordinary manuscript painting and architectural achievement. From within this Persianized Mongol world, the poet Hafez emerged, writing in 14th century Shiraz, creating ghazals of such perfection that he is revered by Iranians to this day. The cycle broke. In the 1380s, Timur swept through Iran again, destroying what the Ilkhans had built. Even Timur could not resist Iran's gravitational pull and became a patron of Persian art. His descendants went further. The Timurids of Herat became the greatest patrons of Persian art in history, funding miniature painting, calligraphy, and architecture of breathtaking refinement. During this time, a Sufi religious order from Azerbaijan took root. For 200 years, they built a network of devoted followers across Iran and Anatolia, setting the stage for the Safavid dynasty. The Timurid world was fragmenting, and from its fractures came Ismail I. The teenage Safavid warrior rode into Tabriz and declared himself Shah of a unified Iran, and Shia Islam its faith. Declaring 12 as Shia Islam, the state religion, forged a new Iranian identity that sharply separated it from the Sunni Ottoman world, creating a dangerous new fault line within Islam. The Shia-Sunni divide made the Ottoman-Safavid border a perpetual battlefield. At Chaldiran in 1514, Selim I's Ottoman guns destroyed the Safavid cavalry. Shah Abbas I, learning from Chaldiran, built a new army modeled partly on the Ottoman and European examples, a standing force of musketeers and artillerymen loyal to the Shah, not the tribes. Shah Abbas I, ruling from 1588, transformed Isfahan into one of the most beautiful cities on earth, a declaration in stone and tile. By the early 18th century, Safavid rulers had grown weak. In 1709, the Afghan Ghilzai tribe revolted in Kandahar and marched on Iran. They besieged Isfahan for 6 months. The Afghan invasion in 1722 ended the dynasty catastrophically. The city that Persians said was half the world fell to a tribal army from the east. From the chaos emerged Nader Shah, a brilliant, brutal military genius who expelled the Afghans and briefly built a new empire. In 1739, Nader Shah invaded Mughal India and sacked Delhi, carrying back the Peacock Throne and the Koh-i-Noor diamond, briefly making Iran the wealthiest power in Asia. Nader's brilliance curdled into paranoia. He blinded his own son on suspicion of treachery, and in 1747, his own officers assassinated him, his great empire dissolving in a single night. By 1796, the Qajars consolidated power, a Turkic dynasty that would rule Iran for over a century, but with growing weakness. What would follow would be more than just territorial defeats. In 2 catastrophic wars against a modernizing Russia, Iran lost Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan forever. Iran realized it had fallen deeply behind. Russia and Britain turned Iran into a battleground for imperial influence, signing agreements that carved up Iranian sovereignty. In 1872, Nasser al-Din Shah granted the British a concession covering virtually all of Iran's railroads, mines, and industry. Lord Curzon called it the most complete surrender of a country to foreign interests ever devised. In 1891, a nationwide tobacco boycott forced the Shah to cancel a British concession, one of history's first mass civil disobedience movements. Qajar Shahs photographed themselves in European finery, sent their sons to Paris, and hired Austrian officers for their army, while the country's infrastructure and institutions collapsed around them. In 1906, Iran achieved a constitutional revolution, establishing a parliament, the Majlis, one of the first in the Islamic world. In 1908, oil was discovered in southwest Iran, and with it, a new century of foreign hunger for Iranian resources began. But Russia and Britain crushed the constitutional movement with force, and reformers were executed in the streets. In 1919, Britain secretly negotiated a treaty that would have made Iran a virtual protectorate. When it became public, Iranian outrage was total. Even Britain's allies in Tehran refused to ratify it. In 1921, a military officer named Reza Khan staged a coup, becoming Reza Shah Pahlavi in 1925, founding the last Iranian dynasty. Reza Shah built roads, railways, and universities while suppressing the clergy and forcing the removal of the veil. The Trans-Iranian Railway, built without foreign loans, financed by a tea and sugar tax, crossed the Alborz and Zagros mountains simultaneously. Engineers called it one of the century's greatest feats. In 1935, Reza Shah formally asked the world to call his country Iran rather than Persia, asserting the ancient name Land of the Aryans as a statement of national pride and civilizational continuity. In 1941, Britain and the Soviet Union invaded and occupied Iran, forcing Reza Shah to abdicate in favor of his young son, Mohammed. From this humiliation rose Mohammad Mosaddegh, a democratically elected prime minister who dared to nationalize Iranian oil in 1951. On March 15, 1951, the Iranian parliament voted unanimously to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. In Tehran, the crowds danced in the streets. In London, officials called it theft. Britain responded to nationalization by blockading Iranian oil, sending warships to the Persian Gulf, pressuring buyers worldwide. Iran's economy began to choke, and Mossadegh's position weakened. In 1953, the CIA and British intelligence orchestrated a coup. Mossadegh was overthrown, imprisoned, and democracy strangled. Mohammad Reza Shah returned from exile, now backed by American power, ruling with growing authoritarianism through his feared secret police, Savak. The Shah's secret police, Savak, trained by the CIA and Israeli Mossad, ran a network of informants, torture chambers, and disappearances that made political dissent existentially dangerous. Against Savak, Iranian poets and novelists fought back. Sadegh Hedayat, Ahmad Shamlu, they wrote truth in metaphor, smuggled dissent inside beauty, and Iran's underground culture thrived. In 1963, the Shah launched the White Revolution. Land reform, women's suffrage, and industrialization meant to modernize Iran by royal decree. A religious cleric named Ruhollah Khomeini publicly condemned the White Revolution and was exiled, but his voice kept reaching Iran from abroad. Khomeini's sermons, recorded on ordinary cassette tapes in Paris and Najaf, were duplicated by the thousands and distributed through mosques across Iran, technology transforming political mobilization. The 1970s oil boom made Iran wealthy but grotesquely unequal. Western luxury for elites, poverty and repression for millions below. In 1975, the Shah abolished all political parties and created one, Rastaki. By 1978, strikes, mass protests and marches filled Iranian cities. The Shah's regime was crumbling. And on August 19, on what was the anniversary of the 1953 coup, the Cinema Rex in Abadan was locked and set on fire, killing over 400 people. The Shah blamed revolutionaries. The people blamed the Savak. On September 8, 1978, Black Friday, government troops fired on protesters in Jaleh Square in Tehran. The number killed is disputed, but the regime's legitimacy never recovered. On January 16, 1979, the Shah boarded a plane and flew into exile. He never saw Iran again. 14 days later, Ayatollah Khomeini landed in Tehran, greeted by a crowd of millions in one of history's most electric moments. The revolution in 1979 was not only Islamist. Marxists, nationalists, liberals, and feminists all contributed to overthrowing the Shah, with belief in reshaping the republic that followed. Most were wrong. In April 1979, Iranians voted to become an Islamic republic, based on Khomeini's doctrine of clerical rule. Khomeini's revolutionary doctrine, Velayat-e-Faqih, was unprecedented in Shia Islam. The idea that a single cleric should hold supreme political authority. Within weeks, the rooftop trials began. Savak generals and Qajar-era officials summarily tried and shot at dawn. The revolution was consuming its enemies and would soon consume its friends. Within 2 years, Khomeini had outmaneuvered every ally. Newspapers closed. The elected president, Bani Sadr, fled in disguise. Those who helped bring down the Shah now sat in his cells. In September 1980, Saddam Hussein's Iraq invaded Iran, beginning an 8-year war of devastating attrition and suffering. In the Iran-Iraq War, the Basij, teenage volunteers given plastic keys to paradise, were sent in human wave attacks across minefields. It was sacrifice on a scale that shocked even veteran commanders. In March 1988, Saddam Hussein's forces used nerve agents and mustard gas on the Kurdish town of Halabja. 5,000 civilians killed. Iran never forgot the world's silence. The Americans backed Saddam Hussein during the Iran-Iraq War, providing satellite battlefield intelligence, facilitated weapons financing, and full diplomatic relations, all while knowing Saddam was deploying chemical weapons. Then, the USS Vincennes, operating in the Persian Gulf, shot down Iran Air Flight 655. All 290 civilians, including 66 children, were killed. The United States never apologized. In the summer of 1988, on Khomeini's secret order, thousands of political prisoners, mostly leftists and mujahideen, were executed in Iran's prisons. It remains one of the revolution's darkest chapters. The war ended in 1988 with no territory gained and over 1 million dead. Khomeini accepted the ceasefire. He said it was like drinking poison. He died in 1989. Ali Khamenei became supreme leader, a political priest managing a post-war Iran that needed rebuilding but also needed to be controlled. President Rafsanjani's 1989-97 era focused on economic reconstruction after the war. The reforms were pragmatic, technocratic, and deeply corrupt. Iran's nuclear program became the defining international crisis of the 2000s, a struggle over sovereignty, technology, and fear. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, elected in 2005, channeled the anger of Iran's dispossessed, promising to put oil money on the table of every Iranian household while confronting the West with theatrical defiance. In 2010, the Stuxnet computer worm, jointly developed by the US and Israel, destroyed centrifuges at Iran's Natanz nuclear facility. It was history's first acknowledged act of state-on-state cyber warfare. Between 2010 and 2012, 4 Iranian nuclear scientists were assassinated in Tehran, killed by magnetic bombs attached to their cars in rush-hour traffic. Iran blamed Israel. After 9/11, ordinary Iranians held candlelit vigils for the American dead. Tehran's football stadium held a minute of silence. Iran quietly assisted the US in Afghanistan, an opportunity for rapprochement missed. In 2015, the JCPOA nuclear deal offered a moment of cautious reconciliation, quickly extinguished when America withdrew in 2018. Through the 2010s, tightening international sanctions devastated the Iranian economy, impoverishing ordinary people while the system held firm. General Qasem Soleimani, commander of the Quds Force, built Iran's regional network across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, seen by Iranians as a bulwark against the West. A US drone killed him in January 2020. On April 1, 2024, Israel bombed the Iranian consulate in Damascus, killing 7 IRGC officers. Under international law, a consulate is sovereign territory. Iran's responded with over 300 drones and ballistic missiles launched directly at Israeli territory. Israel, with American, British, and Jordanian assistance, intercepted the vast majority. Iran considered the matter closed, But in late 2024, thousands of Hezbollah pages detonated simultaneously across Lebanon and Syria, an intelligence operation killing dozens and wounding over 3,000 in seconds. By early 2025, the United States and Iran were talking. Iran and Washington were willing. Then, in June 2025, while those talks were live, Israel launched a unilateral assault. Israel struck Iran's nuclear facilities, missile factories, and military leadership in a massive surprise attack. The United States, drawn in, bombed Fordo, Iran's most fortified underground enrichment site. Iran's answer was not missiles, it was geography. The Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil passes every day, was closed, and stock markets worldwide fell. It brings us to today. For Israel, a nuclear-capable Iran on its doorstep represents an existential calculation. For the United States, it means the reshaping of a Middle Eastern order built since 1945. For Iran, the program is inseparable from a history of being invaded, occupied, and betrayed by powers that promised otherwise. Iran has been invaded, occupied, divided, and sanctioned, and it is still, unmistakably, Iran. The plateau does not forget. Language, poetry, hospitality, the ancient fire. These things persisted beneath every conqueror who thought he had won. Assyrians wanted it. Alexander burned for it. Rome desired it. The Mongols raised it. The Americans backed a king to keep it. All that has changed is the name. 6,000 years, countless conquerors, one plateau, one language, one fire. Whatever comes next, history has answered. Iran endures. History done properly takes time. A ton of research and effort went into this video in particular, as it's not easy to fit the entire history of Iran into a mere 30 minutes. And so if you enjoyed this, please share and subscribe. It means the world to us and makes this all worthwhile. And so with that, we'll see you in the next one.